We are going to begin this morning in the book of Matthew. That is going to be our basis, our foundation throughout the remainder of this series all the way to Christmas Eve. We are in the New International Version. You'll have your notes so you can see we're going to be in the beginning of the New Testament and the beginning of the Old Testament. So we will be in Matthew, we'll be in Genesis 37, 38. That'll be pages 31 to 33, and then we'll be all around Genesis, so you can just start there with Genesis 37, and then Matthew chapter 1, of course, is the beginning of the gospel, so you just go to the New Testament, and you'll find that, and we're going to begin there. If you're on a device, we are in the New International Version. And Matthew says this is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah, watch this, the father of Perez and Zerah, and here it is, whose mother was Tamar. Let's bow. God, we pray as always that the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts would be acceptable in your sight. O God, our strength and our Redeemer. And we commit it all to you now in Christ's name. Amen. I want you to think for a moment about a family secret. Just a family secret that maybe only a few of you know, or it may be just a secret that you have that maybe nobody else knows about or only a few know about. And I want you to hang on to that secret for a moment. Then I want you to think for a moment, what happens if people find out that I'm not who I say I am? About a year and a half ago, I found out a family secret. If you think I'm going to tell you what it is, you're nuts. You want to go on Jerry Springer with me, I'll let you know. But we found out something that was like, oh, that's interesting. It was like my friend who did the whole ancestry DNA thing and then found out he had two sisters, stepsisters, that he didn't know about. Now, it was nothing nefarious that had happened, but they just, because the dad had dated this woman and then the woman had died, and they found one another, so it was a good thing. But that's not always a good thing. In fact, by the way, when you do the DNA thing now, it says, if you do this, you may find out things you don't want to know. I'm paraphrasing. Because sometimes there's secrets that family had. There's secrets that we have that are so nefarious, so difficult, so hard to deal with that we think if anybody else knows, they're not going to love us, and certainly it's going to keep God from loving me and being who I'm supposed to be. There are people that look at God like that. And that's what I said earlier in our announcements. If you're one of these people that was done with church because you have somebody telling you what to do all the time, telling you this is what you got to do, and you can't have this lifestyle, or you can't do that, or we don't like these people, but these people are okay, you've been in the wrong place. Because that's not who God is, and that's why we're doing this series. Because all of these folks that are mentioned in Matthew chapter 1, and we started this last week with all of these sort of what I would call nefarious people, which will be my favorite word during this message today. These nefarious people are mentioned in the book of Matthew as what we look at as a part of the story, but what we're finding out is they're not the part of the story, they are the point of the story. And often we've missed it. So we're introduced to a guy today by the name of Judah, and I'm calling him an unlikely ancestor. You know, when you're going to be royalty, and you look at what happens over, especially across the pond, there has to be people born a certain way, and they're prepared all the way through, and then you have the spare heir, and you have all of those kinds of things. But the bottom line is there has to be a solid bloodline. Now, the thing is that when the Jews were reading this from Matthew, they were going to want to see that there was a bloodline, because Matthew was saying, this guy Jesus, he's the promised Messiah. But they were going to go, oh yeah? Well, if he's a promised Messiah, where is he in relation to David and to Abraham? Which is why Matthew starts out and says this is a genealogy of Jesus, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then he traced his ancestry. But as we said last week, these people are scratching their heads. They're like, okay, you could have just mentioned Judah, went right over him, and you didn't have to mention Tamar, but you went and you did it. And they already knew the story. But if I were to ask you about Judah, you'd be like, no. You may know a little bit about him if you've been around here. But if I ask you if you've been in church for any length of time, you've always heard the story of Joseph and his coat of many what? You've even seen maybe Broadway plays. Didn't even know that was based on a story from the Bible. Because Joseph gets all the press in the Bible, but not Judah. But see, you can't tell the story of Judah without Joseph. Let's go back and see where all this began with this guy by the name of Judah. Now we are going to jump now to Genesis chapter 37. So you should be back there now, and we're going to actually start, and I'm not going to be reading, just so you know, we're not going to be reading all this. Now, Joseph is the youngest of the children of Jacob. Joseph has quite a few brothers. Now, Joseph was, I don't know whether he was that, I think he was that irritating little brother. He was 17 when we pick up the story here. Now, Joseph was, you know how you go, oh, well, you were always mom's favorite. You were always dad's favorite. Well, the scriptures tell us that Joseph was Jacob's favorite. So much so that he had made this beautiful ornamented robe for him. And so, Joseph comes along one day and he goes to his brothers, he's got them all together, his mom and dad. He goes, hey, guess what? I had a dream. I had a dream that we were out in the field and all of these sheaves were out there and they all stood up and they bowed down to the smallest sheaf. And I think the smallest sheaf was me and I think everybody else was you. And the brothers were like, what did he say? And then he goes, and I had this other one too, and all the planets and all the universe was bowing down to me. And Joseph is telling them this, and they are hacked. They are torqued. They are ticked. And those are the cleanest words that I can use this morning on Sunday morning in church. They were upset. They're like, you think that we're ever going to bow down to you? So they got to the point where we learn that they literally hated their brother. Now, we're not talking about they hated him. And that's the terminology that is used in here. So, and you jump down, it says his brother, Joseph, Israel, or Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he'd been born him in his old age and made the ornate robe for him. So Joseph has the dream, and then all of a sudden one day, his father says to him, listen, your brothers are out grazing the field, down in verse 12, and he says, I want you to go out and see him. And Joseph goes, and he looks for his brothers. And he's going to take some food and some supplies and everything out to them. And so Joseph went after his brothers, and we pick this up in Dothan in verse 17. But they saw him, listen, verse 18, here it goes. But his brothers saw him in the distance. And before he reached, listen at this, before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. They are going to kill their own brother. They had a plot. They see him coming. They're like, here he comes. Here he comes. Look at it. Here comes the dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him, and we'll see what comes of those dreams. You know what? The dream will never come true because we're going to take him out right now. Well, Reuben, one of the brothers, was like, hang on. Said he tried to rescue them from his hands. He said, let's not, guys, come on. We can't take his life. I know you guys hate him. I hate him too. I'm never going to bow down to him, but we really can't take his life. And so he says, throw him into a cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. And Reuben had his own little subplot going, saying, hey, you know what? I'll rescue him later. So then when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing. They took him and they threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, and there was no water in it. So I want you to get this picture, okay? Here comes Joseph. They're torqued. They want to kill him. Reuben says, no, we can't do it. Let's throw him into this empty well. And so they see him. They take the robe off because that showed them that their dad loved him more than all the rest of them. They rip the robe off. They throw him into the cistern. So there he sits. Now I want you to see the next. Look at this. There was no water in it, verse 25, as they sat down to eat their meal. Seriously. You get the picture? You ever see this before if you've read this? They throw him in the cistern. So you have to wonder, he's in the cistern, and he's probably scared out of his mind. He's a teenage boy, and they could probably hear him yelling. And they could probably hear the more desperate yells. Why are you guys doing this? Maybe there's screaming and tears. And they're chomping away, eating, trying to ignore the screams. They look up and they see a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh. And they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Enter our new friend, Judah. Judah, who was one of Joseph's brothers. Now let's watch. Judah said to his brothers, hey, guys, I got an idea. We're not going to gain anything if we kill him and cover up his blood. Let's sell him. The better plan. Let's make some money off him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. So Judah hatches this plan, and he goes, you know what? I know what we're going to do. We're going to sell him. And then they further hatched the plan and said, we're going to take the robe and we're going to put animal blood on it, and we're going to take it home, and we're going to tell Dad, guess what? Dad, Mom, we're sorry. Joseph is dead. He was eaten by a wild animal. This is all we have left. And so now, in the midst of this, here's Jacob, or Israel as he was known, and Jacob, same thing. And him and his wife are weeping. He was grief-stricken. And Joseph is on his way. And Judah and Reuben and all the rest of them think, he's gone. What does this have to do with the Christmas story? Well, see, Joseph takes up a whole bunch of real estate in the book of Genesis, more than anybody else. But there's an interlude. You know how when you're watching something, there's always, even if it's a Hallmark movie, there's always a subplot going on. Like look, we all know how the Hallmark movies are going to end. They're going to meet, there's going to be conflict, and then at the end, they're going to kiss, or they're going to get married, or something's going to happen, and everybody's going to end happily ever. We know they all end the same way, but we still love them. But there's always a subplot if somebody's mad at somebody or something. There's always a subplot in every story. Well, all of a sudden, here in the middle of this thing about Joseph, guess what happens? Jump over to chapter 38, because now we learn a little bit more about this wonderful guy named Judah who decided to sell his brother. Now, look, at that time, Judah left his brothers, verse 1 of chapter 38, and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hira. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole thing here, but let me just tell you what has happened. I'll tell you the story because I want to get to the point. So get this. Judah has two sons. Has three sons, actually. His first son, a woman by the name of Tamar, marries him. But all we know is that, and you can read this later, that something happened that Judah's son did evil in the sight of the Lord, and God took him out. Killed him. Gone. Now, the rule in their culture was, in order to keep the family line going, the next son would take over and would be the father of the child. There's a thing called the kinsman redeemer. It's another message or a couple of messages altogether. But so he was chosen, the next one in the line. Judah goes to him and says, "Listen, you have to continue the line." Well, he didn't like it because he knew the child was not going to be considered his. It was still going to be his brother's, and so he did. And this is all I'm saying. You can read it because I can't even read it out loud. Of how he prevented this from happening. Okay? So because he did that, God takes that second one out. Well, now, what's Tamar supposed to do? Because he's got a third son that is really, really young. And so Judah says to her, "Listen, I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to go home, and I want you to go home to your dad. I'm going to take care of you, and I want you to live as a widow. And when my other son gets older, then I'll give you off in marriage." Now, what's happened is Judah goes from what I'm going to call bad to bawdy really, really fast. So he's supposed to be taking care of Tamar. He's supposed to be caring for her needs, giving her money, supporting her, doing all of these kinds of things. And so now he kind of forgets about her. Now I want you to jump down to verse 13. Actually, before that. After a long time, Judah's wife, verse 12, the daughter of Shua died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, so Judah's wife died. Okay, ready? You ready? Here it goes. Judah's wife dies. He goes to Timnah, and the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira, the Adullamite, went with him. When Tamar, who's Tamar now? Judah's who? Daughter-in-law. Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep. She took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Anim, which is on the road to Timnah, for she saw that, though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given him as his wife. So Judah went back on his promise. Listen, this is unbelievable. Verse 15, when Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute. Okay, hold on. Now, we just got to go past that. Now, she's trying to set this up. So she must have in her mind that Judah has a problem with prostitutes. She's thinking, I know how to snag this guy. So she takes off the widow's clothes. She puts on the clothes of what they would call a temple prostitute. She's sitting right there where she knows he's going to see her, but she's got a veil across her. So nobody could really identify and they couldn't see. So, here, listen. Verse 16, not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over by the roadside and he goes, hey, baby. Well, that's not exactly how he said it, but you could see him kind of going, hey, how much? She says, what are you going to give me to sleep with you? Verse 16, he says, here you go. This was the going rate apparently in that day. I'll send you a young goat for my flock. What's the price? I'll give you a goat. Okay, that's a good deal. That's a good deal. Are y'all following this? This is pretty crazy. She's like, oh, no. She's smarter than that. Really? But you're going to send me the goat, but we're going to and then when I say, we're going to, and then, but you're promising me that after we, that you're going to send me a goat? No. I want something now. Well, he says, what pledge should I give you? She said, your seal at its core. This is the official seal that was identified people. It was the identifying mark. It was specific to an individual. And I'm sure that Judah was a leader in the community. They knew who he was. It wasn't like a big town. Like, I'll go into Cooper City where I live, and there's guaranteed that I'm going to see somebody that I know if I go to a restaurant somewhere, or if I go to Publix or something like that. This is even a smaller town, so they all know who he was. So you see the cord and the staff that's in your hand, and so he gave them to her, and he slept with her, but he doesn't know this part. Watch this. She became pregnant by him. Whoops. The story gets worse. She took off her veil after he left, and she put on her widow's clothes again. Goes back home. Now watch what happens. Judah gets a buddy and says, listen, I need you to do something for me. Don't tell anybody, but listen, there's a temple prostitute, and I owe her a goat, but I don't want to take the goat down and deliver it to her, so can you take the goat down and deliver it to her? And, she may give you something back, so can you go do this for me? And the servant's like, sure, I'll take it down. So he goes down to take the goat, and he starts asking everybody, where's the temple prostitute at? They were like, there's no temple prostitute here. There hasn't been a temple prostitute here in years. So he goes back to Judah and he says, verse 22, I didn't find her besides the men who live there, so there hasn't been a shrine prostitute here. Uh-oh. So Judah gets worried. He's like, okay. She doesn't want the goat. I can't find her. She's got my seal. She's got this. She's got all of this stuff of mine. And he goes, I'm going to become a laughing stock. People are going to realize that I did this. This was all supposed to be done in secret. I'm sort of ashamed of this, but I'm not. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let her keep it so that we, we're even. Even though I can't find her. That's good. Now, watch this. Verse 24. About 3 months later, ding, 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 Judah was told, your daughter-in-law, Tamar, is guilty, watch this, of prostitution. And as a result, she is now pregnant. Now you would think that Judah would go, well, let me talk to her. This is not good. But, you know, she is my daughter-in-law, and let me find out what's happened, and I'll take care of her, and, you know, we'll do what we got to do. I mean, obviously, I've 2 sons. I promised her my 3rd son, and I didn't give it to her, and, you know, that kind of thing. And so he's going to find all of this out. Nope, Judah doesn't do that. He says this, bring her out here and have her burned to death. Do you see that? Really? She's pregnant. She's being the prostitute. I love that King James says she's been playing the harlot. I don't know what that means, but it's another way for saying she's been prostituting herself, and now she's pregnant. And so what does he do? Self-righteous Judah, the guy who sells his brother down the river, the guy who lies to his father and says, your youngest son is dead. The guy who sleeps with the prostitute and then can't find her, and then he's told, listen, your daughter-in-law, your very family member, is pregnant now. She's been a prostitute, and his response is what? Burn her. Side note. Watch out for people who harp on the same issue over and over and over again. Watch out for the people that are judgmental of everybody and their brother, because there's a good chance that wrapped inside that judgmental nature is a secret that may be similar to the very thing that they are judging you about. Because we get self-righteous sometimes, don't we? This guy is so self-righteous. He is so judgmental. And so here we go. We're on our way out. They're going to take care of her. Look at this, verse 25. As his daughter-in-law was being brought out, they're going to burn her. They're going to execute her. They're going to set her on fire and listen to her scream, because she deserves it after what she's done. She sent a message to her father-in-law. I am pregnant by the man who owns these. And she added, see if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are. Ouch. Just at that moment, not seconds before she's about to be burned to death. And it says, verse 26, Judah recognized them. And here's what he said. He says to himself, not to everybody that's around him, she's more righteous than I am. Now listen to this. He doesn't say because I slept with a prostitute. She's more righteous than I am, since I wouldn't give her my son, Shelah. And then I love it. Here it is. Are you ready? And he did not sleep with her again. Well, thank God for small miracles. Thank you very much. He didn't sleep with his daughter-in-law again. Good job. When the time came to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. She gave one birth, one came out, but then the other one was considered the one that came out first. And the midwife says in verse 29 at the end, so this is how you've broken out. Are you ready? And it says, and his name was Perez. Remember Matthew 1? Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Judah? God could have done this another way. Joseph was the one that was deserving to be in the line, not Judah. This story could have read differently, but see, here's the thing. This is the subplot in the other story, because remember, we left Joseph in the cistern. We left Joseph where he was being sold into slavery. And then suddenly now, this whole thing happens with Judah and Tamar, and Perez is born, and all of that. And in the midst of all of this, now 20 other years pass, or something in between, And Joseph, while all of this has been going on, there's been another story going on. Joseph starts to go through the ranks at Potiphar's house. And suddenly he's now the second most powerful guy in the land. And a famine starts. Famine starts. And so Jacob says to his kids, he goes, listen, I need you guys to go down there and to talk to these guys because we need to get some kind of grain. Can you help us? And so they get down there, and guess who the guy is that's in charge of it? Joseph. Remember, the brother that they wanted to kill, the brother that they sold, the brother that they hated, is now in charge of the fact of whether they are going to survive. And so Joseph plays around with them over and over and over again, and he has them come and go and come and go, and finally he says, I'll tell you what. He jabs him a little bit. He says, you got another brother? He goes, I want you to send that other brother down here, and you have to leave him here. And Jacob's like, no, I've already lost one son. I'm not going to leave him down there. So we're going to jump now to Genesis chapter 44. Genesis chapter 44, and there's some interesting things that are going on in chapter 44, because now Joseph kind of sets it up so it looks like that Benjamin, the youngest, is there, and he's stolen this cup, and now there's going to be big problems. And so all of a sudden, when you jump down to verse 14, Joseph now is still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in, and they threw themselves. Did you hear that? Joseph was in the house when Judah and his brothers. Judah's not mentioned in the list normally. You know why? Because he's not the oldest. But Judah. Interesting. Judah and his brothers came in, and they threw themselves to the ground. The very dream that Joseph had, they throw themselves to the ground, and Joseph said to them, what have you done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination? And here's Judah. Watch this. Here's Judah. What can we say to you, my lord? Judah replied, what can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. But by the way, all we know is that Judah has been carrying a secret, two secrets all of these years. One is he sold his brother and they lied to his father. Two, he slept with his daughter-in-law and the two children are his. God has uncovered your servant's guilt. Here it is. We are now my Lord's slaves. We ourselves. And the one who was found to have the cup. Guess what? We're going to serve you. Joseph's dream's coming true. Joseph says, far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who's found to have the cup. And so then Judah comes up to him again and says, listen, pardon your servant, my Lord. Listen to Judah begging. Let me speak a word to my Lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself. My Lord asked his servants, do you have a father or brother? And we answered, we have an aged father, and there's a young son born to him in his old age. His brother is dead, and he's the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me so I can see him for myself. And we said to my Lord, the boy can't leave his father, and on and on and on this goes. Judah begging. Joseph playing with them a little bit. And now, all of a sudden, when you go to the next chapter, verse 1, chapter 46. Here it is. 2 chapters. Chapter 46. Joseph, verse 1, then Joseph could no longer control himself before all of his attendants, and he cried out, have everyone leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. Okay. The seminal moment. All of a sudden, Judah, who sold Joseph into slavery, who has been begging and is not yet recognized because Joseph was only 17 and now he's probably in his 30s. He's bowing down to him, and then Joseph comes in and he can't contain himself anymore. And he looks at all these guys laying down on the ground in front of him. And he says, hey, it's me. I'm your brother. I'm your brother Joseph, who you sold into slavery. And I'm sure Judah was like, uh-oh. What would I do if I were in this situation? Judah knew what he would have done, because he was going to burn his own daughter-in-law until he found out that he had a secret. All the secrets must have come flooding back at that moment. Everything. And Judah thought, wait a minute. I'm the guy that sold him. They're going to rat me out. He could kill me. He's going to get back at me. You know what Joseph did? He went to each one of them, and he cried with them, and he kissed them. And Joseph's answer was, look, what you guys meant for evil, God meant for good. Do you know why I'm here? I'm here all these years later so that you guys don't starve to death. I'm here all these years later to provide food for you. I'm here in this position so that everything else is going to go on. Wow. And here's Judah at this moment, receiving the mercy that he didn't deserve and the grace that he didn't deserve. And Tamar must have flashed in his mind. Boom, boom, boom. He must have been ashamed. The secret. Ooh. What do? They got sort of everything back together, and everybody was back together, and Jacob came down, and could you imagine when they had to tell Jacob, their dad, hey, Dad, listen, all these years, we got to tell you something. We may have told a little lie to you about Joseph a number of years ago, like Joseph's alive. What? Joseph's alive and he wants to see you. They had to have told Jacob the story. Jacob had to have known that how now Joseph, God had prospered Joseph, and he had made his way all the way up, and now his son was alive, and Jacob was rejoicing. But still, Judah, really? You're out of my will. You're done. You've carried this for 20 plus years. You didn't say a word to me about it. I'm finished with you. You thought you were included in the will? You are done, buddy. Well, that's kind of what we think would have happened. Genesis 49. And then I'll be done taking you all over the story. Verse 1. Jacob's ready to pass on. Jacob calls for his sons, said, gather around, so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. And he goes to Reuben first, and then he goes to Simeon and Levi and tells them what's going to happen. And now it's reckoning time. Now he gets to Judah. Verse 8. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. Ready? You are a lion's cub, Judah. Do you know that Jesus is referred to, if you've been around church for any length of time, as the Lion of the tribe of fill in the blank if you know it. What is it? Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down like a lioness. Who dares to rouse him? Listen, the scepter, the ruling scepter, will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. Listen at this. Until he to whom it belongs shall come, And the obedience of the nations shall be his. You know who he's referring to, right? The Messiah. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in robes, in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. Okay. That's not what I expected. What about you? Judah? Why not Joseph? Man, Joseph had a chance to be with Potiphar's wife, and he said no. Joseph didn't complain about being in prison all of those years. Joseph was the perfect child. Joseph had all of this stuff together. He had reached some of the highest success. He's the type of people that if I were God, I would say, no, he's the one I want. He's my example. He's the one where this has got to go through. We got to keep this thing pure. Nope. Because remember what we read in Matthew. And I want you, when the next time you read this again, this is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Not Joseph and his brothers, but Judah and his brothers. And Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez was the father of, and on it goes. Can I just tell you something? Judah's not a part of the story. He's the point of the Christmas story. And we miss it. We put the baby in the manger and we talk about silent night, holy night, and we don't realize that the very people that are in Jesus' line are the people that he came for. So I want to say this today, a couple things to you as we wrap up. This is what this means. This unlikely ancestor who had secrets, you may have secrets. You may have unlikely ancestors. You may have stuff that you've been carrying for years. And I want to tell you this right now, today. First of all, I want you to remember this. Your history does not have to be your destiny. Your history does not have to be your destiny. We can talk about what our parents did, what happened here, what happened there. This could have happened, we could have had an addiction, we could have had all of these things that happened in our past. But just because it happened then doesn't mean that's who you have to be today. That's why Jesus came. He didn't come to say, I want you to change. He came and said, listen, I came near. I'm taking you with me. You don't have to change anything. I got this. Because the thing is that God used Judah in spite of himself. And eventually, after all of these years, he got it cleaned up. And even in the midst of the mess, God had a whole new mission. I don't care what your mess has been, he can take it and turn it into a whole new mission. That's the point of the story. Not the part of the story. Something else. Your secrets and your shame is only a part of your story, but it's not the story. It's not the story at all. It doesn't have to be, because that's the point of why he came. That's it. Your secrets, your shame, they don't have to be your story. And can I tell you something else? I'm going to use the Baptist term now that we like to. When we talk about the word sin, everybody kind of freaks out. Oh, everybody! But it was an archery term that meant to miss the mark. So all of us have done that. But let me say this. See, Christians, other believers, unfortunately, have made you think this. See, God and Jesus are wonderful, but God's people sometimes are irritating to be around. They can be the most judgmental, mean-spirited people around. Really. But can I tell you something? Your sin is not your end. Your sin is not your end. Just look at Judah. See, God's grace is enough. His grace is enough. See, I think about what Jacob did for Judah. Judah was probably thinking, oh gosh, what's going to happen now? And as Jacob put his hands on Judah, he looked at him and he told him not who he was, not what he had done. He said, here's who you're going to be. And you know that's what God does, our Heavenly Father does for us. We come to him and he goes, yeah, I know about the secrets. I know about the shame. I know about the murder. I know about the lies. I know about the illegitimate children. I know about all of that stuff. I know it all. But guess what? I don't see that. I see who you can be. And that is the story. That is the message of Christmas. So the next time you get to a genealogy, don't look at it and go, that's only part of the story. It is the story. Let's pray.